All right, that was previous testimony just a few minutes ago from Detective Troy DeGaulle, the homicide detective in the Charles Merritt murder trial. I want to bring on my guest at this time, Joseph Scott Morgan, forensic expert. Joseph, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm excellent. I'm so glad to have you on because there's so much I want to talk about. We've heard testimony from the prosecution that says the family was bludgeoned inside that home, but we know many people went inside the home just days after February the 4th of 2010 and saw nothing that resembled a crime scene that we would expect if that crime happened inside the home. So based on your expertise in crime scene cleanup, how long would it actually take to clean up a crime scene like this, especially if it's only one person?
Well, a lot of that is heavily dependent upon several factors. First off, the person doing the cleaning, how much comfort do they have in this environment? I think I've come across a lot of these cases, Vincent, in my career, and I know that you probably have too, where people begin to really, go and they dig in. They have this idea that it's going to be very easy, and it's not, because you can't appreciate the totality of all of the evidence that's spread about. And also there's the human element. They have to get past this idea that they're cleaning up blood, potentially brain, any other kind of body fluids, any other kind of tissue. You've got bone, you've got skin, this sort of thing. So it's a very difficult process. And also, do they have the appropriate tools to do this with? You can't just show up with a roll of paper towels and, some standard household cleaner and expect just to wipe everything down.
Right. Now, we just saw a picture of what appeared to be a table inside the McStay home, and there were what appeared to be red drops on that table or whatever it was. Now, the detective in this case, DeGaulle, said he did not see that until the prosecution showed it to him in court. And he said based on his experience, he believed it to be blood spatter. You can see it there on your screen, those tiny droplets of a red substance. So based on your experience, Joseph Scott, do you think that possibly could be blood spatter?
Yeah, the possibility certainly exists. And again, I teach my students at Jacksonville State, if they see red droplets, their suspicion level must go up, but you never refer to it as blood. It's a red substance, unidentified at that particular time until you can appropriately test it. And for the folks at home, just so that folks understand this, when we see something that is red like this at a scene, first off, there's certain levels to it. We have to determine, first off, if it is in fact blood, and then if it is human blood. Could be a dog, could be a cat, any other thing. And then we get into more specifics, like typing the blood and that sort of thing. So it doesn't surprise me that he was not able to appreciate this. Remember what he said. He said this was a missing persons case. They weren't conducting a homicide investigation at the time.
Right. But there's still that question, would this be obvious so soon after the homicides occurring in that case? We want to hear more testimony from Troy DeGaulle. This is cross-examination from earlier.
Securing, in this case, the house would be an important part of that.
Securing the initial response by the patrol deputy and me?
Correct. In other words, let me ask it a different way. If you're going into a potential scene where it could be involved in a homicide, don't you want to secure it so that people can't go in freely and so forth?
Yes, okay, I can answer this.
Sure.
If I know it's a homicide, that scene's been secured long before I arrive. That's patrol's responsibility. Multiple levels of perimeters are set. People are posted to make sure no one enters or exits. That's because it's a known homicide. When I respond to assist a patrol deputy in a missing persons investigation, I'm going in there to just talk to the deputy, find out what he knows, and in this case it was very good that Michael McStay was there so I could interview him and react from there. We always follow leads and statements and evidence. After I did the preliminary sweep of the residence, just walking in with my gun out to make sure no bad guys are in there and no people are injured in there, and I exit the residence, I have no right to be in that residence. None. I would have to have a search warrant to go back into that residence within any time after that. Because of that, I didn't have probable cause to get a search warrant. I would not secure that residence. It's not my place and not legally what I can do.
But you're going in to take the precautions, as you testified to, that you're taking the precautions as if it were a homicide. That's the way you have to treat the scene, correct?
I think I covered that when I explained how I enter a house. We're going in with the patrol deputy. His eyes are, I guarantee you, he's specifically looking for what I said. For people that were injured, bad guys. I'm going in, and my legal right to go into that house is exactly the same as that patrol deputy. I just happen to be the second person we always go in twos. I've explained that. Now, when I'm going in, I do have the knowledge that this could potentially be suspicious, so my eyeballs have the right to look and learn.
All right, that's cross-examination from Troy DeGaulle, the homicide investigator, detective in the McStay murders. Now, Joseph, you were hearing that testimony. What do you think of his testimony right now?
He's speaking the truth, and this is the reality, Vincent. When we have a scene that has been declared a homicide scene, and there's a search warrant which we can execute to go in, we can take all the time in the world that we want to. So in this particular case, what he is stating is the fact that this is essentially, I don't want to call it a welfare check, but he's just going in to make sure that there is no obvious signs of a struggle. There's no signs of huge copious pools of blood, and that there's no sign of a dead body. In this particular case, he didn't. There's any number of legal precedent for this. I think back to Mapp versus Ohio, for instance. You can't search in certain areas. You can only kind of limit the search. The fact that he did not see that blood stain or those what they think are blood stains on the table there is not surprising. In just a cursory view, he's having to cover the entire 360 view that he has in this environment and then get back out. It's held that there are certain parameters that you have to abide by in this environment. And the fact that he missed those stains is not surprising at all.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up, Joseph, because I've done hundreds of welfare checks in my days in policing, and you're exactly right. There's only so much of the home that you're allowed to actually search during that initial welfare check. That's what you're doing. You're checking on the welfare of the individuals inside that home. So you're right. I don't find that surprising at all. But in about 30 seconds, do you think the defense, they know this obviously, but do you think they're just trying to throw that in the jury's mind?
Yeah, they're just trying to plant reasonable doubt here that this guy was failing to do his job. And there's not a lot you can do to counter this in this particular instance. You just have to rely on hopefully the common sense of the jury. And hopefully prosecution will go back and kind of explain that, kind of like the conversation you and I have just had. It's pretty simple as it's applied to the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Charles Merritt is on trial right now for the murders of the entire McStay family. We're hearing testimony from the lead detective, the homicide detective, Troy DeGaulle. That court was on a short recess. I hope they will be resuming here soon. We'll have more of that live testimony as soon as we have it here on the Law and Crime Network. Don't go away. So much more to come. Stay tuned. All right, so we're hearing testimony from a detective with the New Jersey State Police, Joseph Scott Morgan. I want to talk really quick before we go back into court. We know 2 knives were used in this. We know she was stabbed 48 times. But how does one of the knives, actually both of the knives, get bent? Does that tell you how brutal this stabbing actually was?
Yeah, actually it does, Vincent. The power or the use of force that was applied to these blades. I still remember the first time that I saw the larger of the 2 blades, and it's literally in the form of a U, kind of a slightly modified U shape. And he had stabbed this poor woman allegedly multiple times. If I remember, the number was like 48 or 49 times. Absolutely brutal attack. These blades are only meant to sustain a certain amount of pounds of pressure. And in this particular case, he pushed these knives to the limit. Keep in mind, he's probably atop her, straddling her, and forcing this knife all the way through, and striking bone, and then maybe even communicating with the floor beneath her body. So it's a tremendous amount of force.
Wow. Let's hear more testimony from Detective Michael Hughes. All right, so we're looking at testimony there from the detective in this case, in the Jeremiah Monell case. Joseph Scott, I got to ask you, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what is the point of this evidence that he's presenting right now? Because to me, it really has nothing to do with the crime that Jeremiah is charged with. It's not a bloody knife. It's not bloody clothes. So why are we looking at all this stuff?
Well, it's the totality of everything. This is riveting TV, isn't it? A lot of people, I think a lot of people, they watch television crime dramas and they think that court is going to be one way, and it's not. You spend a lot of time doing this. It's only those moments of high drama that kind of punctuate things. This is a necessity, though, Vincent, because this goes to the continuity of the case. It goes to the reputations of all of those that are involved. I mean, at the end of the day, let's keep in mind we're talking about a man's life. At the end of the day, we're talking about what's going to happen to him in the long run. And you have to be able to trust the individuals that have secured this evidence, and they're trying to demonstrate that the chain has been maintained.
Right. I appreciate that explanation, I'm sure, as our viewers do. Let's get to more of that testimony from Detective Michael Hughes. All right, looks like we lost sound in that courtroom, and it appeared they're actually taking the sidebar, so that's perfect timing. Joseph Scott's still with me here. Joseph, we were talking about this evidence that they collected there at the scene, and you made a good point. You have to establish chain of custody. But right now, is the prosecution doing all it can to prove that the defendant in this case is the person who stabbed his estranged wife?
Yeah, I think that they probably are. One of the problems that you run into in this kind of situation relative to the prosecution and the jury is the fact that the jury starts to fidget a little bit. They begin to wonder what the point of all of this is. And one of the things that's kind of concerning is they lose sight many times of what the focus is in this particular case.
Right.
Now, who is the case being made against? And so prosecution has to be very careful walking this line as they present and go through all the various pieces of evidence here.
Right. It looks like that court has resumed. Let's get back to that testimony. All right, so that's still more cross-examination from the defense. We're looking at pictures that Troy DeGaulle actually took inside the home between the 15th and the 19th. Still with me, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, I want to point something out here in the defense. I think in this particular instance is doing a pretty good case. We heard testimony that only 7 pictures were taken on the 15th. We heard that we don't know how many people were in the home between those days. There were items missing. There were chairs that mysteriously showed up in these other pictures. So I think the defense is doing a pretty good case. But it goes back to what we said. In a welfare check, you really can't go around looking for evidence of a crime because you are indeed looking for people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't, there's no way to go in and effectively secure the scene without authority. And that authority rises from a search warrant. So absent a search warrant, you can't go into a private residence and say, okay, well, everybody freeze. No one can move about. No one can enter this residence. Nothing. So, yeah, defense is doing a great job with this, but it's up to the prosecution to come back in and kind of explain this. This is an unusual case in the sense that you've got so much time that has elapsed here, Vincent, over this period of time. Right. So prosecution is going to have to go in, and I don't want to say clean up a mess, but they're going to have to clarify. They're going to have to tighten this down because defense is doing a great job at probing this.
Yeah, and as it stands right now, if I was a juror, I would assume that, yeah, maybe they did botch this investigation. I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break, get more to that live testimony in the Charles Merritt trial. You don't want to miss it. Right here on the Law&Crime Network. All right, we're still hearing testimony from Troy DeGaulle, again, the homicide investigator on the McStay murder trial. We're hearing testimony about the day the trooper that belonged to the McStays was found near the Mexican border. Still with me, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, I want to touch on something here. We heard earlier testimony from this homicide investigator who said there's approximately 100,000 people who cross that border every day, at least back in 2010 when this family went missing. So how do we just say, based on this one short clip of a family of 4 walking with bags into the Mexican border, that this is the key to the investigation?
Very difficult, Vincent. Sum it up in one word, nightmare. Very difficult to surmise anything out of that. You kind of see them walking away from the camera. It's not very clear. It's kind of grainy and dark. Hard to appreciate any kind of detail. And you've got so much potential for people coming in contact with that vehicle as well. And Lord only knows how many families actually walk across that pedestrian area through there, egressing over to the other side. So, yeah, it's a difficult narrative to try to marry up with what's being told here.
Yeah, and really quick, we were looking again at that picture of what appeared to be blood spatter there on the scene. We got less than a minute. What do you take of that picture? Could it be blood? It hasn't been tested. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the potential exists, at least to my eye, given the fact that this is a multi-generational photograph that I'm looking at. Yeah, it appears that it may be consistent with blood. But again, the scientist in me doesn't want to qualify this necessarily and say that it's something other than that. I would have to rely. You can't just look at something and say that it is in fact blood. So, as we say in the South, that dog ain't going to hunt.
Yeah, I hear you. Joseph Scott, always a pleasure, sir. I appreciate your time. I know you have to go. I will be signing off as well, but don't worry. We have so much more to come here in the Charles Merritt murder trial, I should say. Again, on trial right now for the murder of the McStay family. Stay tuned to the Law and Crime Network. We'll be right back.